Recovery presents Facing Addiction Podcast.
We have a whole generation that we've lost to fentanyl. Just last year, 100,000 people.
You know, even though I didn't want to believe that it was happening or
to respond in healthier ways so that we could give them the best chance that we could.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Facing Addiction Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Tisdale, the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Peak Recovery. On this episode, I have a very special guest. He's a friend of mine, Jay Dow. He owns Sober Music Company, which he plays music for people all over the country in early recovery and different treatment centers. And he's got a really good story. Jay, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, great to see you. Always good to see you.
Yeah, man. Jay and I go back probably 8 years. I met Jay working at another treatment center. We're both doing admissions at the treatment center.
Yeah.
And ever since then, we've stayed in touch, seen each other around at meetings and whatnot. But yeah, man, good to have you here. So if you don't mind, just take us back and share your experience, strength, and hope. Like, you got an amazing story. So let the people hear it.
I don't know, of all the stories I've heard in recovery, I seem to relate to mine the best. I never came to recovery to get sober. I was a real estate broker. It was a real estate broker. I was doing real estate in North Carolina. I'd moved there as a musician. I owned a recording studio for a couple years in Charlotte, North Carolina. Me and my old guitar player, we moved there with our two stripper girlfriends and got a business partner and opened a recording studio in a 5,000 square foot building and created all these band rooms that were rented to bands, and then we track albums. And so, I was coming up on 30 years old and been doing music all through my 20s, and we had a decent run. We played with a bunch of famous people and all that. But I woke up one day and I was just like, fuck music and this life and dancers and because my friends that were turning 30 were buying houses and careers and driving Beamers, and so I went and got a real estate license and went to work for a land developer, and I sold land for about 5 years in North Carolina. Then I moved back to Phoenix, got my broker's license, and just started killing it. And I made a bunch of money in about a year and just didn't work for about 2.5 years. I worked at the Rhythm Room, this bar. They paid me $100 cash a night, and I could get drunk at the bar and just get up and do whatever. And then I ran out of money, and I woke up one day and I didn't have no money and nothing left to pawn, and called my mom crying. And that's when the first time I moved into sober living for about 90 days. The program was about 90 days back then, and I got in a fight with the coordinator a week before graduating, and then it just convinced the family to let me drink around them again with caution. Like, I really tried to keep my shit together and just keep it. Went to my dad and stepmom's anniversary, convinced everyone back in Illinois I could drink, and I had gone through a depression and came into treatment and picked up my inner child, and everything was good.
Yeah. That's a classic move that a lot of us do.
What's that?
Well, you go to rehab for the first time or whatever, and you're like, you know what? I could socially drink. It's not an issue. And you convince everyone around you, and everybody's buying it. And then if you're a real alcoholic, it doesn't last long.
It does not, and it did not.
Yeah.
And that was such a... So I never came to recovery to get sober, and my problems really, it was so confusing for me because I literally, bro, I was, number one, I was in such delusion that I didn't belong here. And I was in such judgment. I had a brand new paid for car in the parking lot of Crossroads. It was like 2 years old. I didn't pay cash for it, but I paid it off. And it was a couple years old, but it was still brand new. I had a nicer car than the coordinator of Crossroads. And so literally, man, like, I was in such judgment. I was really amazed at going to AA meetings or any recovery meeting and listen to all the war stories, I couldn't relate. And I was like, how did so many losers organize and find themselves? Like, this is, I mean, it's kind of impressive that they're all here, but these people are losers. I am not one of these people. You know, like, I was amazed by it. I hadn't been to prison. I hadn't been homeless. I didn't have a DOC number or any tattoos.
One of the first times that I tried to get sober, I was in a meeting, and the speaker was like, I got a divorce, lost my house, lost my job, lost my car. I'm like 19 years old. I'm like, I didn't lose any of that. I didn't have any of that, but I didn't lose any of that.
Yeah.
I guess I have a ways to go. Like, that's what I was thinking. So that differentiating mindset, I think, is really common.
Yeah, anyway, it was super. So I hit recovery, and then the next 5 years was just, you know, like the big book talks about, Bill Wilson talks about his life falling off like a ski jump. That's what happened to me. My life really didn't start getting bad until I started coming to AA meetings, and I got a sponsor, and I had the same sponsor for 5 years of relapsing. So I relapsed at 30, 60, 90 days, even if I made it to 30 days, for 5 years. So I got sober February 15th of 2012. So February, March, April, May, June of 2012, I picked up my first and only 4-month sobriety chip. I'd been going to AA meetings for 5 years and moving in and out of rehabs and jails. And I mean, once it hit jail, and one thing that I discovered that is once I moved into sober living, once I started going to recovery meetings, I was never able to stand up on my own without a sponsor, without the program, without recovery, and put my life back together. And I was a hustler. I mean, we all are, you know, but I just couldn't pull it off, man. And so what I misdiagnosed, the progression of the disease getting worse, never better, I thought I just stepped onto a streak of bad luck. You know, and it's like, you know, you get the first DUI. It's like, who doesn't have a DUI? You know, right? Everyone's got a DUI except like my mom. But when I got my second DUI, super extreme DUI, I was living in my sponsor's house. So I'd been relapsing for 2 years, and I, right before I moved into his house, I actually got a gig working in real estate. The market crashed in 2008. And I got hooked up with these guys that were working with the banks on foreclosed homes. And I went from, working at the bar to having like 500 bank-owned listings in Phoenix. Like when real estate was over, my shit took off. Like my career just launched at 2009. Like, because these guys I hooked up with were from Vegas, and they've been doing foreclosures for a number of years. They knew all the asset managers, and man, I went on a run, and that kind of exploded after a while, and I moved into my sponsor's house after 2 years of relapsing, and got my second DUI in his house, and that's when I went homeless. You know, and it's a weird thing to be homeless. It seems, I don't know, like it kind of happens like that when you're living, you know, once family is just done, that's, you know, you kind of find out family's done when you come out of jail, and you call everybody and they're like, you can't stay with me. You know, I was just like, wow. Like I had let my mom, my natural mom, live with me in North Carolina for like 6 months to get her life back on the ground. And like the things I said to my mom, both my mom, my natural mom and my stepmom, but the things I said to my mom, especially when she wouldn't let me live with her. I was homeless for 3 years because she wouldn't let me live with her. And I was like, I let you stay on my couch, and my relationship with my girlfriend was ended because of you. And just like the foul shit I tried to guilt trip my mom into letting me live with her. It's just horrible. You know, what do you say about that, man? Desperate people do desperate things, and I got super desperate in addiction.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I know. I remember your story about breaking your finger in jail.
Yeah.
To get
Yeah.
painkillers.
Yep.
And didn't even get them, right?
Nope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think we believe that stuff. Like when you said like you felt justified in saying that in the moment, but looking back, it's like, wait a minute. And that's the great thing about the steps is like you have an opportunity to look at our side of the street.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, Jay's not homeless because no one wants him to stay at his house. He's homeless because of his own actions and addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that I couldn't see it, man. I could not see that. I couldn't. I was just, man, I was in such deep delusion that because my attitude was, man, I would let you stay with me. Mm-hmm. I had let my mom stay with me, but like my aunt and uncle who kicked me out of their house, my dad and stepmom who kicked me out of their house, my attitude was like, I cannot believe how selfish you people are. I would help you.
You're just appalled.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, wow. Okay.
So what happened?
What happened is two of my lowest moments in addiction, I was homeless out here in Phoenix, and my dad, I'm a hillbilly from Southern Illinois, a little farm town of 5,000 people, where I'm actually flying to this Thursday because my dad died in July back home, and I got to fly back and auction off his tractors and the rest of his stuff this weekend. Meeting my sisters. Two of my sisters are flying in. So I have three sisters and two brothers, a natural blood sister, half sister, stepsister, half step brother who's doing 6 years in prison. I talked to him yesterday, and an adopted brother. So we're all of us except my brother that's in prison are going back home this weekend to sell my dad's stuff. But I was homeless out here, and my dad flew me back home to Illinois. His farm's 10 miles from town, and town is basically Walmart, a couple of feed stores, a couple of fast food restaurants, liquor stores. But my dad lives 10 miles from town. So he got me on a plane. I was homeless. It took me 3 days to make it on a plane. But I got there, and my dad brought me home because one of my sisters was addicted to crystal meth and lost her kids to meth for a while, custody of them. And my folks let her sleep on the couch at their house for 2 years, and she kicked meth. And they thought, oh, we'll just bring Jay home and get him sober, but that didn't work for me.
No.
So I literally pulled a 10-speed out of a junk pile. It was all rusted up, like the chain. I beat the chain, oiled it, and I put this 10-speed together. And I told my folks, I'm going to get in shape. And I started riding this bike 10 miles to town to buy vodka. But living with my folks back home is the first time I ever started drinking mouthwash. I heard in an AA meeting you can get drunk drinking mouthwash, so when I started drinking mouthwash, I didn't say this to anybody, but I was like, what has happened to me? Like, who am I? But it was just mouthwash answered that question.
Yeah. Well, you were so remote.
Yeah, I mean, and one time I drank antiseptic. I never drank rubbing alcohol because I heard you could go blind from it. I drank hairspray too.
Really?
Yeah. I heard in a speaker one time, old school, old timer, and so spray it through a sock and alcohol. Yeah, and so I drank hairspray a couple of times at my folks' house. The hairspray, by the time I was drinking the hairspray, I'd already been drinking mouthwash for so long. Like, it was just like doing shooters, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, so when I first started drinking mouthwash, that's when I really realized like what has happened to me. And then I robbed my buddy's house out here. I took a rock and smashed his patio door and stole a laptop. And when I robbed my buddy's house, I had that same experience when I first drank mouthwash of like, who am I? What is... I mean, and so like those are really step one moments for me, but it took me a while to even be able to look back at those, because I didn't get sober over those experiences. But when I robbed my buddy's house, I came into rehab again. I thought, oh, let me go to rehab and get that 30-day sober certificate. And then when I get in front of the judge for robbing Richard Dennis's house, the judge will give me probation because I'm sober a month, you know? And so that's why I came in off the streets the last time. And I read and highlighted the entire big book in rehab, because I was trying to manipulate my sponsor and all his sober buddies into writing me letters and going to court with me. And so, you know, it's just so bizarre that, I mean, they initially wrote the big book thinking you could get it at home and just read it and go to a pastor of your church, clergy, drop a fifth step because they can't tell the cops on you, or they're not supposed to, and you could just get sober reading a book. I mean, they wrote it that way, and ultimately I really did get sober doing that, because I highlighted and read my whole life story, even though I had no intentions of getting sober, and I was atheist at the time. I was just exposed to so much truth about myself that a week before graduating rehab, my dad called me from Illinois and said that my stepmom was on life support and they were taking her off that day, and that she wasn't going to make it, that she was going to die. And she was my mom. She was my best friend. I called her mom. She was my best friend until she had to kick me out of her house and couldn't be my friend no more. But, and so I called when my dad said she was dying, they're taking off life support, I called my sponsor. And this dude had been sponsoring me for 5 years. And I was like, dude, I need to call and make amends to my stepmom. She's going to die today. They can hold the phone out. Like, how do you make amends? And my sponsor said, he's like, Jay, shut your fucking mouth. He's like, you are not going to call your stepmother on her deathbed and try to squeeze in an amends before she dies. You are out of your mind. He's like, you're going to let her die in peace. You're going to leave her alone. This is what he said to me. And he said, you are not going to take her death and your guilt, shame, and remorse and turn this whole situation around and make it about you and your pain. You're going to leave her alone. And then he said, you're not going to the funeral. I was out here and they were all back home in Illinois. And my sponsor said, you have nothing positive to bring to a funeral. You're a homeless drug addict living in a drug rehab. He was like, you're going to stay put and graduate rehab in a week and then move back into Crossroads sober living and graduate that 4.5 month program. And so I stayed put, and my stepmother died, and I was going to leave and get loaded, but the director asked me to do a eulogy for her. And I thought, at least I owe her that, because the last thing I'd yelled to her at the airport was "fuck you" at the top of my lungs when her and my dad kicked me out of the house. They kicked me out of the house in St. Louis, Missouri airport and flew me out to Phoenix homeless. My dad gave me $200 and a one-way ticket. Mm-hmm. And as they were pulling away from kicking me out of their house, I yelled "fuck you" at the top of my lungs at her. But anyway, so the director's like, you know, you can honor her life from here. You don't have to try to go to a funeral and stay sober on a plane and all that. And so I wrote out her life story. I was a month sober when I did this. And Maverick House they take you with the clothes on your back. Mm-hmm. Everyone in there is homeless. And so I sat in front of 30 homeless drug addicts and had written out my stepmother's life story, and I read it and just cried my guts out. I know you couldn't understand anything that I read off those pages, snot bubbles and all that, you know. And when I started reading it, I know I was crying for myself, but by the time I was done reading her life story, I was actually crying for her and my dad and my 3 sisters and my 2 brothers and Nixon, the family dog. And so I did the eulogy. And then the director started singing Amazing Grace, and all these homeless drug addicts were all just looking at each other, started singing Amazing Grace. And when we got done singing, I went like this, which really means I'm good, don't need nothing. And that's where I experienced the truth about myself. And the truth about me is I am not a drug addict piece of shit son. I am a sober, loving, caring son. And I felt like a piece of shit because I did the eulogy knowing I wasn't going to her funeral, you know, and there was no going to be, hey, sorry for yelling fuck you at you. Sorry for stealing from you when you were trying not to die from cancer. Like, it was over. And I mean, and that's what's so like that. The director of that Maverick was not my sponsor, but because he had me. But and this is what's so critical about sponsorship. I mean, yeah, you do step work, you do steps, the 12 steps, but sponsorship is way more than just doing steps. You know, I talk all the time about recovery is a rigorously honest conversation between two sober drug addicts. And every time my sponsor told me to go do something, usually that I didn't want, I had a new experience. And because the director of Maverick House asked me to do a eulogy for my stepmom, and I took the action, I got the experience. Because I went into the eulogy feeling like a piece of shit son, because I was acting like one, but I experienced the truth about myself, and I'm a sober, loving, caring son, and that was my starting point, you know. And like 3 days later, I heard something. It was some people talking in the meeting halls, all noisy, but like a couple of sentences just came into me because I've been worrying all month about where I was going to live when I got out of rehab. My therapist and my sponsor was saying go to Crossroads, but I had a spot on this horse property. I'd been living in a shed on this horse property, and the other homeless drug addict that were on their property had moved out of the little changing house. So I was going to be able to move into this little changing house. Like, people would change their clothes to ride horses, and I was kind of moving up on the horse property because I was in the shed before, but they kicked that guy off the property, so I was going to move in. And so, but I heard coming out of the meeting hall at Maverick House, something just told me move back into Crossroads. And it was such a profound experience that I heard that, you know, and that's kind of where it started. And so then I started praying, because I was atheist up to that point. And then I started praying to my stepmom. And then I started praying to my grandpa. And had been praying the third step prayer the whole time I was in Maverick House, because my sponsor's buddy told me he was going to kick my ass if I didn't do that. So, you know, I was already praying the third step prayer. And the powerful thing about the third step prayer that I discovered, because I was atheist praying it over resentment, but what I was getting from the third step prayer, I was in all this fear about going to prison. And I did the third step prayer on my knees every morning and every night, because that's what this guy told me to do, or he's going to beat me up. And really what he said to me is, if you don't start doing this prayer while you're in rehab for a month, when you get out of rehab in a month, vodka will kick your ass once again, and you might as well have somebody like me kick your ass, who loves you. You know, you might as well have somebody who loves you kick your ass, as opposed to vodka. And so I'd been doing that prayer for a month when my stepmom died. And so what I was getting from the third step prayer was the you know, ease and comfort. Like, it was relieving fear, because I was in a shitload of fear going to prison for robbing Richard Dennis's house. And doing the third step prayer, it was removing fear from me, which was really profound, especially to be 11 years sober now, and I believe in a power greater than me. I believe in reality, you know, I believe in the truth. That's my God. For me, man, after being a relapser for 5 years, I was literally struck sober in that program in Maverick House, because it was a 12-step program. Everybody that works there is low bottom alcoholics and drug addicts, who are now just old battle axes. Everyone's got 30, 40 years of sobriety in there, just hammering you with the truth. Oh, you don't like being here? There's the door, Mr. Dow. Right? Kick rocks. You don't like the food? Yeah, bye. You know? And I couldn't leave because they said that to me, but I had to get the certificate. I couldn't leave no matter what they said to me. And they said a lot of hard shit to me, but I've been doing peer music therapy. Rehab's paying me to do what I do. Right. But I've been going into Maverick House once a month for 10 years for free.
That's awesome.
You know, and they treat me like, you know, it's...
There's the door, like, Mr. Dow.
It's so funny. There's a therapist over there. She's sober 35, 40 years. She's in her 70s, and she was a therapist when I lived at Maverick 11 years ago. And every time I come over there, because she always calls me to schedule me to come over there, and every time I go over there, she's wearing her Sober Music Company shirt, right?
That's
and
awesome.
I'll come in, and she's got a client in her office as I'm loading my gear in, and I'll always poke my head in and go, "Honey, I'm home."
Nice.
Yeah, so it's just cool because they just treat me like staff now, you know, and I'm a success story for them, you know, and Taros owns them, and you know, me and Taros are getting ready to do a bunch of stuff, and it's just crazy, you know.
It is. So what happened after you got out of Maverick House?
Moved into Crossroads. I moved back to Crossroads. I've been moving in and out of Crossroads for 5 years, relapsing, and when I stepped into the courtyard at Crossroads, I literally, not out in the middle, but I was standing in the courtyard and just started crying, just overwhelmed with gratitude. I've been moving in and out of there for 5 years, just like, I mean, this was the conversation with my mom in her car every time before I went back to Crossroads. Fuck Crossroads. Fuck my sponsor. Fuck AA. It doesn't work, Mom. I've been homeless for a year, Mom. It doesn't work. I've been homeless for 2 years, Mom. It doesn't work. I've been homeless for 3 years. Just let me move in with you, Mom. I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in God. Fuck Crossroads. Screaming in her face in her car every time before I went to Crossroads. But this time, my mom didn't pick me up. The coordinator came and got me. He was the same guy that dropped me off because my mom started going to Al-Anon. My sponsor got my mom into Al-Anon, and I remember, so she had been going to Al-Anon, I don't know, maybe 2 months before I made it into Maverick House. And I got to Maverick House, and I called my mom. I said, "Hey, I'm over here. You know, can you bring me a carton of cigarette?" I chewed tobacco and smoked back then. I need some smokes. I need some chew. They got the vending machines, couple rolls of quarters. And my mom said, "I'll be over in maybe 3 days." It was a few days. And I looked at the phone. I go, "Well, I'm here now." And but she was in Al-Anon, and she didn't just drop her life, come running over to me. You know,
Right.
she set that healthy boundary, which really helped me. My mom got well, and then I got well.
Nice.
You know, and so
Yeah.
I got over to Crossroads, and I did what everybody does who gets solid ass real recovery. I did everything my sponsor told me to do. You know, I got sober with one word. Okay. You know, I got sober with one word. Okay.
Anytime someone asks you to do something, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good advice.
Yeah. It worked for me. It really worked for me because my sponsor told me, go volunteer in the kitchen. You know, and so I did. I was washing dishes. I mean, they made you wash dishes. You had certain chores you had to do. Clean the bathrooms your first, whatever, but 2 weeks or something. But anyways, I was doing my normal chore, which was probably cleaning bathrooms. But my sponsor told me, don't worry about working right now. Go do fucking dishes.
Yeah.
And so I was doing dishes for, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. It was a minute. And then it was sober living, and so everyone, you know, you're supposed to go get a job, but most people's families were paying for them to live there and stuff. But I was washing dishes. I wasn't out looking for work, and so a dude from the program came in and offered me a job. He was running a phone room. Or getting ready to set one up, and so he brought me in. And back then it was $100 a week to live there. I can't remember what it was. He was paying me $150 a week. It was $100 to live there a week. He was paying $150, and it paid for me to live there, and it paid for my court fines and for me to buy tobacco. You know, and so
Yeah, just to circle back on this. Okay, so our own ideas get us in a lot of trouble when we're in addiction, and we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that got us into them.
yes,
And so when I got sober, someone asked me, they're like, "Where's your own ideas gotten you in the past?" And I'm like, "Nowhere good." And so that's where you need to start taking direction from other people. If you're like really ready to get sober. Have that okay mentality and just follow people's advice that have come before you and have long-term recovery or have solid recovery.
Yes.
What do I do? Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to sound super unnatural and just weird because you're thinking that feels natural is awful.
Yes.
So
it's horrible.
it's going to sound very unnatural. But if you break through that and just say, okay, good things are going to happen.
Yes. It's really amazing. Recovery, it blows my mind that when you help, like for us, we help alcoholics and drug addicts who've burnt their life to the ground rebuild their life. As a sponsor, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And when I started sponsoring, I moved out of Crossroads sober at 6 months sober, and I started sponsoring at 6 months sober because my sponsor threatened to fire me if I didn't. And so
Were you hesitant?
I was, because he'd been telling me to get a sponsee for a while.
Yeah.
But once I moved out of Crossroads, because I didn't have a car, I didn't have a driver's license, I had to get a car, to get a breathalyzer, get an SR22, just to even be able to try to get my driver's license. And so, I'm sure, I can't remember exactly, but I know I was making excuses because I was 6 months sober when I moved out of Crossroads, and I hadn't sponsored nobody yet. But, you couldn't sponsor people on property, and, so he's probably giving me that leeway. But once I got out of Crossroads and I ran into him, he was like, how many sponsees do you have, Jay? And I was like, well, none. I mean, 2.5 hours to Scottsdale Airport for my job on the bus, 2 hours home. I'm working a 9-hour phone shift. I'm not sponsoring anybody. I don't even have time to go to meetings, bro. And my sponsor said, if you're going to run around this program and call me your sponsor, you're going to sponsor guys. Get a sponsee or get a new sponsor, is what he said to me. And so I took my big book and I got a huge big book. Of course, I left it at home today, but it's usually always in the car. And I took white out and I put, because if you look at the book, it says Alcoholics Anonymous, but you can't really read it. And so I took white out and spelled out and did the Alcoholics Anonymous. I got the big book.
Oh, yeah.
And I started carrying my book on the bus. And one thing I discovered, when you're carrying a gigantic big book that actually has whiteout and Alcoholics Anonymous on it, and you set it beside you on the seat on the bus or the light rail, nobody will sit by you. It's like kryptonite to drug, because everybody on the bus knows what the program is.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting high and acting a fool. And so I started 12-stepping people on the bus on the way to work and back. And I heard my first. And then a car was given to me at 10 months sober. My sister, my sister bought my mom a car, and my mom gave me her car. And actually, my mom called me and said, hey, I'm going to sell you my car. Shannon bought me a car. And so I was like, that's awesome. I was like 10 months sober. And then my mom called me the next day and she goes, you know what? I'm going to give you my car, because Shannon just gave me a car. And I was just bawling, because I just kind of all I did my first year, just cry from gratitude, and it's just, and it took me a couple months to get the breathalyzer and get the car on the road, and people from the program took me to DMV a bunch, took me to the courts to go get my paperwork. Like, the program just carried me where I needed to go. People did. And so I started driving just at a year sober with a breathalyzer in the car. Had it for 2 years of sobriety, never any problems. And the amazing thing about, I had a company that was treating me like shit with the breathalyzer and just super disrespectful to me when I go in and make me wait. And so I had them pull it out. They tried to sue me over the contract and all that. And I went to this other breathalyzer company out in Scottsdale. And I met this kid who had just gotten started. He was installing them all himself and all that. And he treated me so nice and was so cool to me and treated me like a human being, not a piece of shit alcoholic drug addict getting a breathalyzer. At one point he asked me, can you help my friend get sober? Right? And I had 2 years I've seen this guy. And so I ran into him. This is 10 years ago, I met him, and just lost touch after the breathalyzer came out. He probably looked at me on social media over the years, but 2 years ago, I ran into him at the gym, right? And we hugged it out, right? It was just so great to see him. And I just had him on my podcast, and now I'm bringing him over to the, facilities that I'm involved with, Teros and Crossroads, and saying like, hey, if you need to get a breathalyzer machine in your car, use this guy because he treats us like human beings,
That's awesome.
That's why, and then the cool thing, and I explained this to him, and he doesn't get it, but I said, man, the great thing about running into you 8 years later in the gym is I had no resentments towards you because I looked at you as an authority figure. That's how alcoholics operate, I label you as an authority figure, judge you as an authority figure, then I treat you accordingly. But because you were so nice to me, I can run into you in the gym 8 years later, and I'm super happy to see you. And I've had him over to my house, and, every time I see him at the gym, we're talking all the time and shit. It's just great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Because when you're coming up out of the gutter, man, cops are sick of it. Nurses, doctors, bus drivers, DMV, they've had it, with us.
Yeah.
They're just like, man, but then you get sober and they're like, oh, hey, how's it going?
Yeah. Things change.
Yeah, they really do.
Just a quick commercial break. If you guys could hit the like and subscribe button, it would help our channel out a lot. Also, hit the bell icon so you can stay up to date with notifications when we post new content. Appreciate you guys watching the show. Sidebar, you can find highlights of this episode on our TikTok or Instagram. Just search Pinnacle Peak Recovery. Appreciate you. Back to the episode. So tell us a little bit about like your recovery. What's that look like now that you're in long-term recovery?
My recovery is, I have a service commitment. So when I got sober with the Tuesday Night Men's Stag. It's like 200 dudes every Tuesday that meet. That meeting came from California in 1945. It started. And John Butler brought it over here 25, 30 years ago from Cali. And so like people that were involved in writing the big book started this meeting in Cali. And so it's just a no bullshit accountability meeting. There's a group called the Knights here that are just kind of about this sober life. They do heavy duty service work. They adopt a family at Thanksgiving, bring over all the food, bring gifts. They adopt a family at Christmas, take all the food, all the presents for the kids. They go to Mexico and build a house in a week, give it to a family every couple times a year. Like, so I got sober under these kind of guys.
Yeah.
And so how they identify is they identify with their name, sobriety date, sponsor's name, service commitment, and how many sponsees they have right now. Right? How many guys they got calling, what they say. And so that's how Knights identify from the podium. I don't always identify. And at the Stag, we don't necessarily identify that, but we do in conversation. And some guys identify like that, but it's just about accountability. And so when I got sober, I was told to get a service commitment, chair a meeting once a week in H&I. So these guys are all H&I, hospitals and institutions. What that means is you take a meeting into a facility, jail, prison, or treatment center where the people there can't go outside to meetings. So they're all about H&I. And so I got a service commitment at SMI, sober living, at a year sober. I got the car and I started to taking this meeting in Sunday mornings at 9:30 to this ghetto, SMI, sober living. And so that's how I started doing that. And so I chair a meeting once a week in a facility, and that's where I get my sponsees from. And so every time you show up at once a week to chair the meeting, you have to show up, because if you don't show up, there is no meeting. Then you show up every week, everyone's got to get their cards signed and stuff, and then everyone starts asking them to sponsor you. So I don't get sponsees in meetings, I get sponsees in my service commitment. And then it changes over the years. Right now I'm doing one on Sundays, a meeting I started called Handcuffed Ain't Enough at a Crossroads facility, which has basically all federal pretrial release guys. The feds, they're getting ready to go to prison for charges, and the feds release them over there. And so I started this meeting called Handcuffed Ain't Enough, and I run around with all these guys that got sober in prison. And so I have a panel meeting of all these dudes that got sober in prison, and it's really kind of a Q&A. We'll have a guy speak, and then for 15 minutes, and then it's a Q&A about, because it doesn't matter what they do, there's guys that are going to prison. And so it's about, hey, you know, when I get to prison, how do I get involved in recovery in prison? Or guys that are coming out of prison, like, how do I get involved in recovery coming straight out of prison? And so it's a dialogue meeting like that. So I do that once a week right now, and I sponsor guys. I do step work on Sundays, always. You know, my wife knows that's my day. I go to my home group. They said, get a home group, get a service commitment, get a sponsor, get through the steps, sponsor guys. And so that's what I've been doing for 11 years of sobriety, 10 and a half. I've been started sponsoring at 6 months sober. So every Tuesday I go to the Tuesday night men's stag. That's my home group. I go to that meeting once a week. If I don't show up for 2 weeks, people start calling me like, where you at, bro? Ain't seen you at the stag. You okay? And that's the cool thing about having a home group. I take my sponsees to that meeting. And so it's been interesting. Like I performed at Hazelton Betty Ford in Portland over the summer.
Awesome.
And I've been doing Zoom meetings with them. Before I went up there and performed, I've been doing Zoom meetings with them because an old timer in one of my meetings got sober there 30 years ago, and he connected me with them. And so I was doing Zoom meetings with them, and the first Zoom meeting I did with them, just a recovery meeting, before I went up, a guy asked me to sponsor him. And he's a high bottom alcoholic. And I'm so involved in the prisons, and I just sponsor all these guys that are homeless and just come out of prison and done all the, and so I'm just constantly sponsoring all these low bottom alcoholics and drug addicts because that's who I am. But I also was very successful before my life fell apart, and I've been very successful the last 11 years of sobriety. I mean, everybody that gets sober is successful, but I'm no different. But so I've been doing Zoom, sponsoring this guy since June, and he's a high bottom, and it's been an interesting experience. So we do step work on Sundays at 3:30. And it's been interesting working with a high bottom for a change because he's very successful, and his kids are talking to him, and they come over every week and they do dinner, and he's divorced, but it's just I'm able to cover the low bottoms, I'm able to cover the high bottoms because that's what I am,
Yeah.
But it's been nice working with a sponsee who I don't have to say, stay single for a year, bro. Like, let's just stop with the relationship stuff, and that's a big thing. Like, I try to get my sponsees to try to stay single the first year and living amends, paying back all the women they fucked over, just because that was a huge problem for me. My sponsor was just always telling me, like, what do you have to offer a woman, Jay Dow? You're homeless. You live in a sober living. You don't have a driver's license. You don't have a car. You are unemployable. What do you have to offer a woman? And I didn't get it because I couldn't stay away from unhealthy women, And I mean, I could maybe stay away from alcohol and drugs for 30, 60, 90 days, but I always had some girlfriend, and I'm sneaking her into sober living, meeting her over here when I'm supposed to be over there, and just I couldn't stay away from unhealthy people. And, I like that. I always talk about birds of a feather flock together, same hang with same. And when you look at two people, you're really only looking at one person. And when I finally got sober, my sponsor said, Jay, just because a woman says it's okay to take advantage of her does not make it okay. We don't live like that in recovery. We don't take advantage of unhealthy people around here. And that was and so I spend 99.9% of my time with my low bottom alcoholic drug addict sponsees in conversation about, let's just try being single for a minute, bro. Let's get you in touch with you, and I mean, it rarely works, but I make an effort at it, because it's just such a distraction, especially, I mean, when I was trying to get it wasn't like I just would come in and not try to get sober. I mean, I would try, but no matter the progress I might make in recovery, and I did make progress in recovery before I got sober, but I would always relapse because I would have a woman in my life who's getting drunk and high.
Yeah.
It's just, I didn't have a shot.
That's a challenge. And then, I mean, it's really not just women. It's when I got sober, they told me, don't focus on anything else but your recovery. Because most people, when they get sober, they're feeling good. They're like, all right, I got to get back to work. I got to get the job. I got to get the
gym.
I got to get the car. I got to get the girl. I got to get, go back to the gym.
Take care of my kids.
Yeah, there's all these priorities that are, sure, they're valid, like in normal circumstances. But you're a drug addict and an alcoholic. Like, throw those out of the window, and recovery needs to be number one. Those could still be priorities, but recovery has to come first, because if you don't put it first, you're not going to have any of that.
So true.
And I tell people that all the time. It's like, oh, dude, yeah, I'm not going to meetings because I'm working a bunch.
Yep.
It's like, dude, that's not going to keep you sober. And that was the best advice I got, because that's what I did, I just focused on my recovery, and it all worked out. Yeah, I was running around with girls in early recovery, but I also tried to go on what do you call that? Like a dry spell or whatever.
Celibate deal.
Yeah, celibate for a little while because it's causing some issues. But
when did you start working with guys?
Right away, yeah. So when I started working with, right when I got, I think like through step 9, it was like, all right, I got sober the same way, different groups, but it was like H&I sponsees.
Yeah. That's no bullshit.
That's the secret sauce.
Yeah.
And the more I'm focused on you, the better my life's going to get. Like all those cliches, it was just all about service, like helping each other move, like anytime we can get into service. And so right when I got to step 9, it was like, all right, start raising your hand. I'm like, wait, what?
In meetings. Yeah,
sponsor. I can't sponsor what? And it's like, dude, you don't know how to sponsor, but all you're going to do is call me when you get a sponsee and be like, hey, I'm about to meet up with them. What do I do?
Yeah.
And so I got sponsees right away. But mind you, I put together like 4 months in jail. So, I got through my steps in about a month. And so I was sponsoring guys like pretty quickly. And the quicker you get, in my opinion, the quicker you get through the steps, you can't do the steps too fast. As long as you do it thorough and honest, but do them as quick as you possibly can, because that's what's going to remove that insanity. And the insanity is, you know what? I could probably just get drunk. You know what? I'm going to convince my family that I can drink socially. Or you know what? I'm not going to do meth, but I'll just do some coke on the weekends.
Yeah, or weed's legal.
Yeah. So all these insane obsessive thoughts are removed through doing the steps. And so the problem centers in the mind.
Yes.
And so if I'm able to remove that, and
it's I remember when we first met at the rehab that we worked at, I instantly knew that you had solid recovery. You just, recovery is a language, and you just know when you start talking with someone, like, oh yeah, this guy gets it.
Thanks.
I mean, at least at the level of the guys that I run around with, and then I got sober under, who said things to me like, I'll never forget. I was just standing around a circle of the stag guys, and as a relapsing newcomer, and one guy that I didn't even know, he'd been seeing me come in and out for years. I don't even know if I knew his first name, but we're just all standing around, big circle, everyone's joking and laughing. I'm just standing there, and he's like, you need to stop using your mom, bro. I was like, what? I didn't say anything back. I mean, but I thought like, fuck you, bro. Like, you don't know me or my mom. But, you know, I love recovery because we speak rigorous honesty. And the difference between rigorous honesty and brutal honesty is rigorous honesty is honesty with compassion. And that guy that told me, you need to stop using your mom, he ended up over the years, when I was homeless at one point, he had all my stuff in the back of his truck. But one time I was walking to go get drunk and he called me. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm walking to the doctor's appointment. He goes, what are you doing after that? And I go, I'm going to go get drunk. I told him. And he talked me off the ledge that day. I actually didn't get drunk that day. And that was the first time in my life I was ever on my way to go get loaded, and I didn't. Like, I have chills right now. And that was the day. And I got sober within few months of that experience. He's also when my stepmother died, I knew that he had gotten through his mother's death. So I knew it was possible because this old timer had told me about it when his mom died. And so it was just, it was a powerful thing. And what I realized in sobriety, all the things that guys said to me, sober men said to me, that made me hate them even more before I got sober. You know, all these guys were just standing around calling me to my highest and best and loving me until I could love myself. But I didn't know it back then. I just thought they were sober, lame, know-it-all, old guys that just, man, I was just in serious delusion. I'm in front of, I don't know, 15,000 newcomers a year. I'm in front of just rooms and rooms of newcomers with Sober Music Company. And so I talk a lot about step 2, and I talk a lot about you do not have to believe in God to put a kick-ass sober life together. Again, I would come into the program and make some progress, and then people would start trying to talk to me about God, and I was like, no. I do not believe in God, Santa Claus, or the Easter Bunny. I'm trying not to go to jail right now. Sign my card, please. And so in front of all these newcomers, I talk about step 2 and the brilliance of step 2. Thank God step 2 is in the big book, or I would have never gotten sober. Step 2 says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. This is what power feels like to everybody. I'm good. Don't need nothing. That's what power feels like. That's what power feels like. That's what higher power feels like. That's what the truth feels like. That's what God feels like. That's what vodka feels like. That's what crystal meth feels like. Heroin, fentanyl. It all feels like this. I'm good. Don't need nothing. And the brilliance of that is in the big book, they call that experience ease and comfort. That's what I'm addicted to. I was addicted to it with drugs and alcohol, and then I got exposed to the book Alcoholics Anonymous and solid sponsorship, and I got exposed to the truth about myself. I'm addicted to reality. I'm addicted to the truth, and the truth about me is there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. Nothing's wrong. Like the big book is so brilliant because what it says in there, it says nothing happens in God's world by mistake. If you believe in God or not, nothing happens in my life by mistake. And so God's will is what's going on right now all the time. If you want to know what God's will is, look around. It's not always rainbows and butterflies, but what recovery, what the 12 steps have given me, it's a design for living that works. And the world can be burning down in front of me. And because of this program, I can remain in peace and lead. And that's not my natural state. right? It's not.
Right.
When the world's burning down, I'm running over here with the gasoline. That's my natural state without recovery. And so that's why, we're just so lucky, so blessed to be in recovery, because the world is insane, man.
Yeah.
People are lonely and desperately lost in the world, and not even alcoholics and drug addicts, just trying to connect with people and make money and pay bills and take care of kids without even having alcohol and drug problems. I think life is super difficult for a lot of people. And I'm just so grateful that I found recovery, that you found recovery. You're a big part of my program, man. You had a massive impact on me, not just in early recovery, but I watched you support me when nobody else would support Sober Music Company. People are like, you're not a licensed therapist. You can't come in here. Who are you? Please leave, right? That's what people said to me. But you didn't say that to me. And that's just what I love about recovery, man, because I know today, I know what grace is, and I know, recovery got me off my channel. I don't have to walk up to people and talk all about me and Sober Music Company and everything that I'm doing and seek approval from the world no more. I want to know about you. I know about me, and I don't need the world's approval anymore. And that's what I was seeking, even in early sobriety. You run into me in early sobriety, the first few years, all I would do is just talk about Sober Music Company and what I'm doing and this and that, and it's it's a process, man. You know what I mean? Just thank God for this program, sponsorship, solid people, solid friends in recovery who will tell you the truth. Hey, man, you might want to slow down with that. People are sick of hearing of that, bro. I have a sponsor, and I can wrap up with this, but my sponsor that I had for my first 5 years of relapsing, the man that saved my life, literally, he would always have a bottle of mouthwash in the panel of his car when he'd pick me up. And I'd get in his car, and he'd be like, bro, hit that bottle. That breath is kicking. Because he didn't smoke, and I'll be chain smoking before he picks me up for a meeting or whatever, and just being homeless. And he told me that my breath stunk. And it hurt my feelings, but that's another cool thing about recovery is recovery cares about my life much more than it cares about my feelings. And he would tell me, dude, you got bad breath. You need to hit that bottle, and
Well, you wouldn't have known.
no, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so when my sponsees get in a car, there's alcohol free, bottle in the corner in case we need it, and we've needed it because I sponsor a lot of crystal meth addicts who have 3 teeth that are rotted, and I have to talk to guys about, don't worry about your teeth, man. We're going to get those fixed. It's okay. I got my teeth fixed. That's why I love being in recovery, because it's like being in the sober mafia. It's don't worry, I got a guy for that.
Right.
We're going to get your teeth fixed.
Yep.
All right. We're going to get those child support payments going, but not right now. Right? Let's get you sober.
Right.
And then we'll get you connected to spirituality. We'll get you connected to your children, but let's save your life real quick. And then we'll start digging deeper.
That's got to be number one.
Man,
And then the teeth will come, the car will come, the job will
the
come.
girlfriend, the spouse,
all of that stuff comes. And if you're on the edge of a cliff, let's say you're walking off the Grand Canyon and I pull you back and you're all pissed at me, I don't care about your feeling. I'm trying to save your life. And that's the kind of mentality that we got to have in recovery.
Yes, we do. And my current sponsor, who I've had for 6 years, he relapsed at 20 years and 2 months, and now he's got 18 years. But what he taught me is you got to stay loose, man. Stay loose with this thing. You got to save room for God, save room for higher power, say whatever your deal is. You got to don't get too rigid. Like if we get too perfect, we're not going to be able to help anybody.
Right.
You know, and he's really, you know, because sponsorship's a learning process. You know, guy fires you. It's like, oh, all right, well, hey, good luck, man. Or, you know, like in the beginning, it would, upset me and stuff. Like, oh, he's wasting my time. You know, if I was dumb enough to call my sponsor every time a sponsee wasted my time, he'd be like, oh, you mean like the 5 years you wasted of my life? You know, quit bitching.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so.
Well, I appreciate having you on, man.
Yeah,
we'll have
man.
to do it again.
Yeah, I want to have you on mine too.
Yeah, I will. So where could people check out your podcast and Sober Music Company?
Everywhere. Sober Music Company is, you know, TikTok, my website, YouTube.
Do you have Spotify? Are you on
Spotify, all that. You know,
Oh,
the
cool.
songs are on Spotify. My podcast is on Spotify. Just Sober Music Company. I put everything up under Sober
Cool.
Music Company. The YouTube channel, especially, I film a lot of speaker meetings, and I
Yeah.
put all this stuff in the prisons. So everything on my YouTube channel, Florence Prison and I'm in prison, pull the videos off my YouTube channel and are playing it on closed circuit TV to 10,000 inmates on 13 yards.
Nice. That's
yeah,
awesome.
so I have all that stuff on there.
Yeah, so check out Jay Dow, Sober Music Company. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.